book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. I'm here today to start a weekly vlog. I decided in the month of April that I would try to vlog weekly since it is spring equinox for Book Roast's Orilium readathon. I will go ahead and link her down below, so you can definitely go ahead and check that out if you want to take part. It is April 1st today. It is almost or exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I've been busy doing things around the house earlier today, and I'm just now getting ready to film a couple videos, but I wanted to just pop in and say hello before I get on with my day anymore. So I'm real quick gonna go through the books that I'm currently working on. I'm hoping to finish the physical fiction that I'm working on this week, as well as my audiobook. The audiobook that I am currently working on is Cherish Farah, and I believe I'm at around 61% through that book. I was listening to it a lot this morning while I was doing chores, and this is by Bethany Morrow. And I would say this is kind of, I'm thinking it's YA. It's giving off YA vibes since our main character is in high school, but it's kind of a thriller horror situation. We are following one of two Black girls at their rich school, and she is best friends with the other Black girl, but this other Black girl is the adopted daughter of two white parents, while our main character is the biological daughter of two Black parents that she lives with. At the beginning of this book, she is living at her friend's house. Her friend is named Cherish, and this is because our main character, Farah, her parents are losing the house because her mother lost her job. And our main character, Farah, is someone who very much needs to be in control of what's going on around her. And I have no schooling to be able to diagnose anyone, but I am definitely getting some psychopath vibes from her. She does talk a lot about how she and her mother are very similar in the way they use masks and the way that they control situations by being super specific in their reactions and what they say. And it makes me wonder if her mom is also somewhat of a psychopath, or if she's just trying to find similarities between her and her mother so that she feels more normal about the way that she is. But we also talk a lot about how she studies her friend Cherish to kind of gauge normal reactions that she should be having to things. So it seems like these are things that she didn't pick up naturally, like most people usually do, which is why I'm leaning towards her being a bit of a psychopath. I am enjoying the book at this point. I would give it a 3.5 at this point, but I would also say that things are starting to escalate, and there are some slight, possibly cultish elements that are being introduced. Some of those Get Out vibes that this book promised are definitely being inserted into the story at this point. I do think it's really interesting reading from the point of view of our main character. She's definitely not 100% mentally stable, but she is someone who thinks she's so in control that she's not aware that little things around her are showing her and that she's very much not in control of the situation. So that I think is very interesting. So I'm enjoying the story and looking forward to where it is going. As far as my physical book, I'm a little bit over 50% done on page 246 of Escaping from Houdini by Carrie Maniscalco. This book was on my TBR as a mood read, and as far as the Orilium prompt goes, it's for the class lore because it needs to have a map in it. And I forgot to mention, Cherish Farah is, for my physical or my TBR game, was a horror thriller mystery by a Black author. And for the TBR game, it is Demonology, a book that is compared to other books that you have really enjoyed in the past. I forgot to mention that. But in this book, this is the third book to Stalking Jack the Ripper. We are following Audrey as she is solving murders and trying to become a forensic scientist as a young woman in a time where that's definitely looked down on. Women are not supposed to be looking for careers. They're supposed to be looking for husbands. And in this book, they are on a cruise ship on their way to America. And there is a circus that is performing on this cruise that features Houdini, obviously. And murders start occurring on this cruise, and she and Thomas and her uncle set out to try and solve these murders. I really enjoy these stories. I really enjoy Audrey as a main character. I'm very much rooting for her, even though in this book she is getting a little bit on my nerve. I understand that as a young woman, she has the right to rebel in certain situations. It's making it a little bit frustrating for me, who has put herself in the position of Audrey's mother. This is my daughter. That's how much I care about her. But I just feel like some of the behavior that she's doing is very self-destructive, and she's doing a lot of what she's doing in order to help someone she cares about, but it's causing her to kind of isolate herself from the people that she usually relies on. And I have a feeling that's really gonna like kick her in the butt towards the end for sure. And it's definitely threatening her relationship with Thomas, which is one of my favorite parts of the story. And I'm definitely not a fan of that. But, you know, I believe in my couple. Okay, I know she's not gonna go off with this other guy that's definitely inserting himself in the story. Um, but yeah, no, I have to admit, the kind of romantic triangle that the author is kind of creating in this book is definitely distracting from the murder aspect, which is pretty impressive considering these murders are pretty interesting and somewhat based off of the tarot cards and involve like a circus. So there's definitely a lot going on, which I'm enjoying, but I think my brain is definitely a little bit distracted by this insertion of a second love interest. But that's YA for you guys. Like, what's YA without a little bit of a triangle or tent? I guess. I don't know. A little bit of this, an upside down peace sign, you know, because it's not a triangle if there's no bisexuals involved. But overall, I'm still having a good time with this story, and I'm looking forward to continuing it. And I will go ahead and just keep you up to date. As far as other works, I did read the first chapter, as well as the prologue, so about the first 20 pages of Evicted by Matthew Desmond. This is my nonfiction read of the next couple months. And we're following 8 families as they struggle with losing stable housing. And I think that the way he started out this story was rather interesting. The prologue follows, I think, one of the women and her children that we're going to be following throughout the story, and kind of lets you know her situation as it was before what we're going to be seeing in the story, I'm assuming. And then the first chapter actually follows a landlord instead of someone who is being evicted. So we're following a woman who owns multiple properties in an area where a lot of poor Black people live. And this is the demographic she decided to work with. She herself is a Black woman, and in that chapter we watched as she had to evict 2 different families, and it kind of gave like her point of view of why she had to evict them and her feelings on the situation. So I'm very much a see both sides of the story kind of person, so I do appreciate that the author put that in there. And I think it would be interesting if he kind of continued to show the landlord's point of view as well. So I do enjoy the writing in this book as well, which is always good. No one likes to read a dry nonfiction. It doesn't matter how interested you are in the topic. If the writing is just putting you to sleep, then it's game over. So his writing is good and the topic is interesting, so I'm excited to be reading this. Once I finish those, I'm not really sure what I'm gonna get into next. Sorry that this first clip is really long, but my intro clips are just, it's just me talking a lot. But I have a couple options. I do have a collection of short stories, and I'm wondering if I wanna kind of just read one short story every now and then, because I feel like, but in doing that, instead of reading it all the way through, this will act kind of as like a palate cleanser in between books, rather than me just reading it all the way and just stopping and going after like each and every short story, which is one of the things that I don't really like about short stories, because you kind of jump into a story, start to get, you know, immersed, and then are pulled out again, and then end up somewhere else and start to get immersed and then get pulled out again. So maybe spreading this out a little bit more will help me enjoy the short story reading experience. So that is an option. The other option I'm thinking is these Violent Delights. Just because this has been on my TBR so long, I just really want to get to it so I don't just keep pushing it off. But we'll see, because I'm reading a historical right now, and this is also a historical. And one thing I noticed about my March reading towards the end is that I was reading a lot of fantasy romance, and I was really burning out from it. I'm very much someone who needs to be jumping from genre to genre quite frequently so that I don't burn out on them. So we'll see if I decide to jump into this or something else. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish getting ready and film my videos, and I will go ahead and check in with you guys later. Alright guys, it is Sunday evening, and I have just finished escaping from Houdini, and I'm giving my review. I think since I just finished it, I'm kind of going back and forth on my ratings, either a 4 or a 4.5. Sometimes with books like this where you really enjoy like the last few chapters, you just need to step back real quick to see if it really deserves that higher rating after taking into account like the entirety of the story. So I might sleep on it and then do my final review on Goodreads tomorrow. But just know it is either a 4 or 4.5. I had a really great time with the story. I may have mentioned that I was getting a little frustrated with our character and her interest in another man in this book. I do understand that obviously being young, you're not gonna love just one person your entire life, you know, or at least most people don't. But at times, I have to admit, it was a little distracting from the story. But later on, I think I got a little bit more used to that second possible romance, and I was able to focus more on the circus aspects of the story as well as the actual murders. And I really did enjoy those circus aspects. I really like the descriptions of Houdini's tricks and of the other circus workers as well, and kind of how the murder murderer was integrating those acts into how he was killing people. I thought that added a very interesting aspect to the murders. The ending of the story really got to me and gave me a lot of strong emotions. I almost started crying at one point because I was just very anxious about what was happening. And I think it was a really great way for the author to finish up this story. She was definitely playing with our emotions there, but it was a wonderful ending, and I'm very excited to see our character in the final book, to see how she finishes up this quartet. All right, so I'm gonna go off and make dinner. I'm just making spaghetti because I am feeling lazy. But I will probably check in with you tomorrow after I read my nonfiction portion and to let you know what physical book I am reading next. As far as my audiobook goes, I did listen to it a little bit today, but not so much that I have anything more to say. So I will check in with you later. So I lied earlier. I said I would check in with you tomorrow, but it is still Sunday night. It is almost 9:30. I'm about to head to bed, but I have some reading updates. So I did get through another chapter of Evicted. I don't have anything to say about it though. So yeah. I also read a few poems from Cat versus Human, illustrated by Yasmin Sarabek. As you may have seen, I read a few to my cat Loki. I don't really, when it comes to poetry, I have to admit I don't absorb a lot of the information that they're trying to get across. I think with poetry, it's really something that you need to like sit down with and try to interpret. And I just don't have the patience to do that. So I'm mostly just reading this for a fun time. I think it's kind of funny to read these poems to my cat. So that's why I'm doing that. I'll probably read a few a day before getting through this book. And then lastly, I decided to read the first chapter, or not the first chapter, but the first short story in The Toughest Indian in the World by Sherman Alexie. I believe this one was called Assimilation. Yes, that's what it was called. And it was only about 20 pages. And in this one, we are following an Indigenous woman here in Washington, so it's local. And she is married to a white man, and they have 4 children. And one day she decides that she needs to sleep with an Indigenous man, and she just chooses a random guy. She's like, I don't care if he's ugly, I don't care if he's rich, I literally don't care about anything if he's a good or bad person. And she does have an affair, and that's just kind of the setup of the story. Then she meets up with her husband for dinner, and the story just kind of follows them as they're waiting to be seated, and on their drive home. It kind of just follows their thought process it kind of follows their thoughts on certain topics, both hers and his. So we have them having like a conversation in the present about having to wait to be seated and talking about the restaurant, and then it jumps a little bit into like how they met, and kind of about their kids, and even thoughts on race because they are an interracial couple. Talks a little bit about their opinions on their jobs, and just a little bit random, but at the same time I felt that the story had a really good flow to it, and I really enjoyed the writing, and I was actually quite interested. I felt like the way the story was set up, it was made to be a short story. I got what I needed out of it, and while I wouldn't be opposed to learning more about these characters, I am pretty satisfied with what I got, which is pretty rare when it comes to short stories in me. So I'm actually going to give this short story a 4-star. So that is good for me. So I decided that my next full-length read is going to be These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This is a punishment prompt for my TBR. It is also for the Orilium prompt, Elemental Studies Flowers on the cover. I forgot to mention that the toughest Indian in the world is for the inscription class to choose a book from the top shelf. This was a book from my top TBR shelf. And then for the cat poems, this is not for Orilium in any way. It's just another punishment prompt for my TBR game. And I believe the toughest Indian was also a TBR game prompt. It was a fantasy book by an indigenous author, but I ended up using one of my rewards to ignore the genre, which is why I'm reading a contemporary book. But anyway, These Violent Delights is a historical book that is set in historical Shanghai, and it is inspired by Romeo and Juliet. We are following two characters from opposing gangs. They used to be romantically involved but fell apart at some point. However, there seems to be some sort of plague going around that is causing people to tear out their own throats. So the two gangs need to come together to resolve this issue. This is one of those books where a lot of people don't like it, which, makes it a little hard to go in. Now, I feel like one of the things that people didn't like is that there wasn't as much romance as they were expecting. So I'm going in here thinking the romance is a pretty minor part of the plot, and hopefully that'll leave me less disappointed than most others. So I will go ahead and check in with you once I get a little way more into this, and talk to you later. Hey guys, it is Monday afternoon and I have finished the first chapter of These Violent Delights. I took the cover off, but I figured I'd go ahead and give you my initial thoughts. So unfortunately at this point, I'm not loving it. I'm really struggling with the writing. I'm just not connecting to it. It seems very much the writing of someone who's just kind of getting into writing, by no means like a beginner, but you can definitely tell that this is a debut novel. The writing at times, especially in the first chapter, just wasn't very impactful and was almost a little overdone to the point of cheesiness. So I am struggling a bit with that. Otherwise, at this point, we have just read from the point of view of Juliet, and it seems like she has just recently returned to Shanghai after spending quite some time in New York, and it seems that Romo was part of the reason for why she was sent away from her home for such a long time. So she's definitely holding a grudge against him. So, I mean, as far as characters and plot goes, I can't say too much because I'm only about 20 pages in. I definitely am going to give this book a bit more of a try, probably at least 50 pages to see if the plot intrigues me more, if the characters grow on me more, to see if all those kind of overshadow the fact that I'm just really not enjoying the writing before I decide if this needs to be a DNF or not. So I will go ahead and check in with you guys later to see if this book is a go or a no-go. All right, so it is a little later on Monday still, and I just finished my audiobook for Cherish Farah. I don't really know what to think about this book. I think it was very interesting. I haven't read too many books from the point of view of someone who could definitely be seen as a psychopath. And I always think it's a really interesting experience. So I did enjoy that aspect of it. As far as the plot goes, I feel like it's not an overly eventful book. It's definitely more of a suspense, a somewhat slow building thriller situation, which I do enjoy from time to time, but I do feel like the story just never built up to a big enough climax to really take the story to the next level. So I'm thinking that this is a 3.5 star read. I did enjoy it. I enjoyed her main character. I enjoyed her twisted relationship with her friend and her friend's parents. I would have liked to dive a little bit more into her relationship with her mother, because that was definitely strange. There were times where I was almost wondering if her mother wasn't really there. Like, I think her mother like existed and stuff, but there was definitely situations, especially towards the end, where her mother was mentioned, and I was like, I feel like this might be a figment of her imagination. So things were a little weird towards the end, and I definitely would have liked to explore that mother-daughter relationship a little bit more, especially if her mother was also a psychopath. But yeah, overall, I thought it was an interesting time, and I'm glad that I read it. Unfortunately, it didn't live up to the Ace of Spades or When No One Is Watching, which is why I chose this book for the Orilium prompt to read a book that was similar to one of your favorites, but still had a good time and definitely think it's a book worth checking out. No other updates at this time, so I will check in with you later. All right, so it is Tuesday. I'm on my first break of the day, so it's around 10. I just read another chapter of The Toughest Indian in the World. In fact, this short story was called The Toughest Indian in the World, and we're just following a young Indian man. Well, I think he's like in his 30s, so approaching more middle-aged, and he works at a newspaper. But that's not really a big part of the story. It's more that his father used to pick up every Indian hitchhiker that he met. He would never pick up any other race of hitchhiker, but his son then took on that tradition of picking up any Indian hitchhikers that they see. And in this book, he picks up one that goes from reservation to reservation to fight their toughest Indian for money. And it's just, you hear a little bit of the conversation and the night that they spent together and a little bit of how that changed our main character. And I think I'm going to give it 4 stars. At first I was going to just give it 3.5 because I had a good time with it. Once again, enjoying the writing. But the last few sentences of this book were just like really impactful for some reason and made me tear up a little. So I am going to go ahead and give this one 4 stars as well. So far, the short story collection is going pretty well for me. I am going to go ahead and read another chapter of my nonfiction book, Evicted. I don't really feel like picking up these Violent Delights. I'm not giving up on it yet. I may read it more later today if I finish my nonfiction chapter soon enough, or I might give it another try tomorrow. At this point, I've only read the first 2 chapters, but I'm just not loving it. So that's unfortunate.
Step 1, wake up early, gonna rise with the sun. Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you wanna be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good.
Alright guys, so it is Wednesday. I'm on my last break of the day, so it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I just wanted to check in with you because I have a few reading updates. The first is that this morning I started Silver in the Wood by Emily Tesh. Let me just check my computer for what it fulfills. For my TBR game, it is a fantasy book that I used a random number generator to get. And then it looks like it's Alchemy for the Orilium readathon for metal in the cover. So this is a very short book. We're following, I think he's the Green Man, or just a man who protects the woods. He seems to live there and has lived there for about 400 years. He seems to kind of keep balance because he protects the are they called druids? I forget what they're called. Dryads. So he protects the dryads there, who I believe live in some of the trees, but he also seems to protect the woodsmen who cut down some of the trees to do building, but they do it in a very responsible way. But occasionally druids that have lost their home for too long and become angry try to kill them, and so then he takes those dryads and kills them so that they find peace and death, kind of. And at the beginning of this book, a new man becomes the owner of the land. His name is Silver, and I'm assuming that the two are going to form some sort of relationship. Silver seems to be aware of what our man is. What's his name? Tobias. So our character Tobias, he seems to know what he is, and he's okay with keeping his secret and everything, and is going to help him keep it. I am enjoying the writing so far. I'm only 28 pages into the book, but I'm enjoying the writing, and the story is just kind of whimsical, so I think it'll be a good time. I did also start my new audiobook today, Unwind by Neil Shusterman. I forgot to check out what percentage I'm on, and you guys are on my phone, but I think I'm already about 60 something percent into the book. Today at work, I'm working a workload where I can listen to an audiobook while I'm doing it. So I've been able to already get through a few hours of it. In this book, we are following 3 teenagers who are in the process of being sent off to be unwound. And this is something that your parents can choose to happen to you between the ages of 13 and 18. And pretty much you are killed, though they don't use that word, and every single part of you is used for some sort of organ transplant, from your eyeballs to your hands to all your organs, your brain matter. Everything is distributed to other people, and this happened after there was a war between what we would call the pro-choice and pro-life people. So this is pretty much like the outcome if there was a war over abortion, which, considering where the US is right now, this story is definitely hitting pretty hard. I'm really enjoying it. I'm really immersed in the story. I'm really interested in all of our characters and their differing views on society and how they got to where they are, because all 3 of them are being unwound for different reasons. Now, I'm going to be totally honest, I don't know any of their names. This is what happens when I listen to audiobooks that I just don't absorb. any of their names usually. But we have a young man who's about 16 whose parents chose to unwind him because he has some anger issues. We have a young girl who I think is also 16, who is being unwound because she was raised by the state, which a lot of people are, because a lot of people are having kids they don't want because they can't have abortions, and the state just can't afford to keep her alive anymore. And then we have a third child who's 13 and he's considered a tithe. And a tithe is someone who knows their entire life that when they turn 13, they are going to be unwound. And they kind of see this as like an honor. And it's kind of like a religious concept. So I'm really enjoying the story and them kind of running away to try and survive until the age of 18. Once they turn 18, they can't be unwound anymore. So they just need to survive for the next few years. And it's definitely a very exciting story, and I'm having a great time. So thank you, Is Bailey Reading, for recommending this book. Because the prompts for this book are, for my TBR game, it is sci-fi and an audiobook. Hence, I'm listening to it an audiobook. And then for Orilium, it is Conjuration, recommended by a friend. So the last thing I want to talk about is these Violent Delights. I'm on page 28. I haven't picked it up for a couple of days, which has been great. I've had a great time not reading this. So I do think that I am going to DNF it. Usually I don't give up on a book this quickly. But I think I honestly knew by the prequel that I was just not going to be able to vibe with the story. The readings or the writing style just really didn't click. And in the first couple of chapters, I didn't click with either of the characters either. And just a combination of all that, and already my kind of low interest in the story after hearing so many negative things about it. I'm just not gonna put myself through reading it, especially since this book is over 400 pages. Another thing is, I believe this is a YA story, and just based off of what we're dealing with, we're in the city of sin, we're dealing with some sort of monster, we're dealing with these brutal deaths, we're dealing with gangs, that a YA book just doesn't seem like it could do this story justice. And just based off what I've read so far, it's just slightly on the cheesy side, which is not what I want from a story like this. So I am going to DNF it, which means that for the Orilium prompt of elemental studies, flowers on the cover, I'll need to choose something else. I'll see if I can read something this month, but as I've mentioned before, I usually give myself 2 months to complete the prompts since I'm doing 2 different careers. So I may just need to make sure I get a book with flowers on the cover on my TBR next month. All right, guys, that is my update, and I will check in with you later. Hey guys, so it is Thursday. I'm about to go on my lunch break, but I did just finish Unwind by Neil Shusterman. Let me move over a little so I can put my picture here. And I think I am actually going to give this 4.5 stars. I would say that overall, the book as a whole, the majority of it is a 4-star read, but there was this one section where they kind of walked you through the unwind process of a person. And honestly, if I hadn't been like busy at work, I would have just like laid down on the floor and curled up into like a little ball and cried for a little while. So I do have to give it that additional 0.5 star for just that one scene. It was super impactful. Throughout the entire story, I really enjoyed how complex all our characters were and all the character growth that they all experienced throughout the story. I really enjoyed all the social commentary that was in it and all of the different groups with all their different agendas and how they kind of interacted and fed off each other throughout the story was really interesting, and it'll be interesting to continue the series and see how all of this plays out, because I really do not know where it's going to go from here. So, but I'm definitely excited to continue and glad that I read this series, because I don't think it was really ever on my radar, even though I really enjoyed the Size series by Neil Shusterman. I don't think I really had plans to read this, but I did, and I had a great time. And yeah, other than that, I don't have any other updates. I'm still working on Silver in the Wood, and I'm not sure which audiobook I'm going to start next. I have a couple that are available to me. One is A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, and then the other one is a nonfiction for the guy that played Draco Malfoy. And I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to read that now. If I do, I probably won't talk about it too much. I don't know how much he goes into the whole Harry Potter world. I try not to mention that too much on my channel or anything because of the author being transphobic. But I did have a crush on Draco Malfoy, so I do need to read that, and hopefully he maybe even addresses the issue with the author and everything. It's only like 5 hours long, so I may jump on that and read it real quick and then jump into the Becky Chambers book. But we'll see what I'm in the mood for next time I pick up an audiobook, and I will let you know. Alright guys, it is Thursday evening and I have just finished Silver in the Wood by Emily Tesh. I think I'm going to give this 4 stars. I did quite enjoy the story, especially the second half of the story, once our kind of villain was introduced and the pace of the story sped up a little bit. The first half was rather slow, which I think, considering that this was a very kind of magical story, was okay. I enjoyed the writing of it. I thought our character was interesting. I really enjoyed the subtle magic that was in here and the folklore that was present. I thought it was a very magical story that balanced kind of slight coziness to a degree, but also a certain eeriness as well. So I had a good time with this story, and we'll definitely pick up the second one as well to see what is going on in that. But yeah. So tomorrow is the last day of the vlog, since I believe I started it on Saturday, right? So I'm pretty sure tomorrow's the last day of the vlog. So I think I'm going to kind of work on these 3 books, reading another chapter of my nonfiction, maybe another of the short stories in The Toughest Indian in the World, and maybe read some poems as well. And that way, when on Saturday I start next week's vlog, I will be starting with a fresh start of a new physical book. So I will probably check in with you tomorrow to wrap up this vlog. All right, guys, it is Friday evening, a little bit before 9:30. I don't think I'm going to do any more reading tonight because I am tired. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this vlog. Reading wise today, I made a little bit of progress on both of these. I read, I think, 2 chapters of this today and got to page 63. Still enjoying it. It's definitely eye-opening to kind of see the lack of empathy that is being showed to the people that are struggling with having housing and things like that. But I'm looking forward to reading more about this and just becoming even more familiar with this subject. I then read 2 more short stories out of The Toughest Indian in the World, bringing me to page 75. The first one I believe was called Class. Yeah, Class. And I gave that one 3 stars, I believe. I didn't like this one as much, but the writing of the story continues to pull it through for me. I really do enjoy this author's writing. And then we read South by Southwest. This one I just finished. I think I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. I thought it was an interesting story. We're following a white man who decides to hold up a pancake house, I think it's called, probably similar to like a Denny's, and he asks everyone there for $1 and then asks one of the people to run away with him so that they can go on a non-violent killing spree down to Arizona. And a overweight Indian man decides to join him on this journey, and the two of them just try to make their way to Arizona while simultaneously trying to fall in love, even though neither of them are, homosexual, but they do kind of develop kind of a strange connection. So it was an interesting story, so I'm going to go ahead and give that one 3.5 stars. All right, for this little wrap-up portion, I'll be looking over here real quick at my computer. When it comes to my Orilium classes, I finished 4 out of my 10 classes, which, considering this is just the first week, I think is pretty good. I finished my conjuration class by reading Unwind by Neil Schusterman. And then I finished my lore class by reading Escaping from Houdini. I then finished my demonology course by finishing Cherish Farah. And finally, I finished my alchemy course by finishing Silver in the Woods. I did also start and DNF These Violent Delights, which was supposed to be for elemental studies, but I will find something to replace it. This was also a punishment prompt for my TBR game. Cherish Farah was also a book off my TBR, which was a horror mystery thriller by a Black author. We also finished my mood read off of that TBR by reading Escaping from Houdini. We then finished a sci-fi that is an audiobook by reading Unwind, and finishing a fantasy that was from a random number generator, or selected via random number generator. So we are going strong, and hopefully that continues in week 2. I will be starting next week's vlog, and in there I will be continuing these, as well as starting the remainder of the physical books on my TBR. I do just want to quickly say, as far as video content, I don't have any plans on filming anything this weekend, which means that most likely next Friday, or this Friday, since this is technically going to be posted on Monday, there's not going to be another video. And usually I do try to post twice a week, and so far since I started my channel I've been able to do that, but I do have a feeling that moving forward that there will occasionally be weeks where I'm not able to do that, just with things picking up at work a little bit. I'm just feeling a little bit more brain dead, and I just don't want YouTube to become a stressor or anything. So I apologize if my content becomes a little bit more inconsistent, but I will try to continue to post as regularly as possible because I do enjoy making content. But as always, guys, I appreciate your support when you watch my videos. Let me know down below how your first week of the month went, and I hope to see you guys next time. Bye!